I honestly assumed that it would be a ribbon baton from floor gymnastics because that's what
Yeah.
like that's the Prismari thing, right? Like they got the athletic scholarship for gymnastics. That's what I read.
Or
I'm not even
just
banging on them. I think that's cool.
beautiful, creative stuff. All right. Do I have this muted? Yeah.
I think I've got everything set up. So hopefully everybody can hear everybody and see everybody in the stream. So this is exciting. I think, Jenny, it's been so long. I think this is the first time you've joined us, and we've been streaming.
On video. Yeah.
I think the last time I saw you in person was 3 years ago in downtown Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah. When I was there for a social studies conference that was also very cold and wet. Because Chicago is where you want to have a conference in late November.
Well, it's not any cheaper then. So no, it's not.
So I don't know why, but this conference, the social studies conference, every other year they decide to go between someplace cold and someplace warm. So the year before that we were in Texas and then Chicago. And this year we were supposed to be in Minneapolis, although it went virtual, so that didn't happen.
Well, that's fine. Minneapolis is near the Mall of America.
Yeah.
Which is
although next year we're not really going warm because we're going to Philadelphia next year. So
it depends,
It's always sunny.
I heard it's always sunny. Yeah. So, Dar Junior's there.
If the review needs to run much past 9 or 9, let's say 10, then I will just duck and apologize.
Okay. In that case, we should probably get started then.
That'd be awesome.
Is that your children not sleeping?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. It could be.
I thought
there are many
heard
children that could be.
I mean,
this happens to be this time.
Right.
It is bath time right now.
Well, I cut a deal with my kids that they are not great at honoring.
That's not unusual, I don't think.
My child ominously just asked me when the podcast started, so we'll find out.
Yeah.
Why?
Why do you need to know where the router and the power box are?
Hey kid, now you're messing with my stuff. So.
Is that like getting a phone call from your kid that says, where does our insurance go to the hospital for?
What's our copay for the emergency room?
There's a lot of Calvin and Hobbes strips that are basically that.
All right. Well, in the interest of not losing Brandis too much, shall we go ahead and get started?
Yeah.
All right.
Show on the stream.
Oh, the stream's been going for a while. People have been watching our shenanigans.
I know.
So, all right. And I already hit record on the audio about 35 seconds ago, it says. So I think we're ready to start.
Is that like an Ozymandias thing there? I started recording 30 seconds ago.
Yeah. Right. It's too late. The plan has already begun. All right. This episode of The Tome Show is brought to you by our patrons at patreon.com/The Tome Show. Welcome to The Tome, a D&D news, reviews, and interviews show, and I'm your Tome host and Professor Dr. Jeff Greiner.
And I'm Tracy Hurley, and in this surprise round, we're going to college as we discuss our first impressions of Strixhaven, a curriculum of chaos.
In our orientation tour are some of the most prestigious new students on campus. First, valedictorian from Gnome Stew High School. It's the star of the Mage Tower team. It's our group's jock. It's Jared Rasher.
That is so amusing on levels there. Hi,
Second, transferring in from the designer's den, And fresh from an appearance on the Rose stage, it's the theater kid, Ginny Loveday.
Woo! That's fairly accurate, actually. I'll take it.
And lastly, from the hollowed howls of tribality, it's the peppiest cheerleader you'll find anywhere on campus. It's Brenda Stoddard.
You'll have to assume I'm doing the kicks off camera. Big high kicks, real short skirt.
Awesome.
You could have stopped after the first clause.
Could have, but it made it more uncomfortable if I didn't.
So in this episode, we're discussing Strixhaven, a curriculum of chaos. Strixhaven is the third book based on a setting created for Magic the Gathering that has been converted into D&D. It's a setting about a magical school where you place students on campus, having adventures as you learn, love, and hopefully graduate. As a reminder, in surprise round episodes, we get our first impressions of a book very quickly after the book is released, sometimes before, not in this case, but the understanding that we probably haven't done a deep read through and definitely have not played it. And then if needed, we'll revisit the book later after it's been out for a while and we'll have a chance to dig in deeper.
So before we dig in, though, I want to remind folks that if you want to support the show, you can become a patron over at patreon.com/thetomeshow. The support of the patrons helps me pay the bills and keeps the show going. Now, on to Strixhaven. In the interest of full disclosure, I believe each and every one of us is working from a review copy that Wizards of the Coast sent us. Is that accurate?
Yes.
I'm working from a review copy that someone kindly sent me. But yes.
Yes.
It was derived from Wizards of the Coast. Just
Eventually.
they send a standard cover, and so I sent him my standard cover. Jeff, do you know anything about how that works?
Do I know anything about how standard covers work? What do you?
No, my point is about mailing it on to another member of the team.
I know it.
You get two, and then you just pass one along to your other half.
Yeah, it is. It is possible that I have been getting review copies from Wizards since the beginning, and they always send the standard cover and the review cover, and Tracy gets all of the special covers because because it is important to me not only to make Tracy happy, but also that the spines of my books look more or less the same, and the special edition covers don't do that. So
I'm doing you a favor because I've been feeling a little guilty about always getting the special cover.
No.
So okay.
Yeah, no.
I can be guilt-free.
Yeah, no. I'm okay giving you the special cover because I want the spines to look the same.
You just have to have a separate special bookcase, Jeff.
I see.
That bookcase happens to live at Tracy's house.
Yes.
And you have to understand that some adventures aren't ever going to have a Hydra 74 cover. Sorry.
So, okay.
But
So we're all working from review copies in one way or another. So Strixhaven. Let's start off with just what is the premise of this book?
Well, it's that we're having a magically good time at university because isn't that what everyone does at university? No?
I think the premise is college was it was a heck of a great time to get in lots of weird trouble.
Mm.
Yeah. And, naturally, it being a magical university, so the magical school trope that we've got going on there, while you're at school, something goes horribly wrong.
Mm.
Every single year. Right, Larry?
Like it's as much break bills as it is, your Hogwarts. To me,
Yeah, I would say more so. It is very much not Hogwarts. Like there are
it's a little gentler than break bills. Like tonally, I think it's a little not important.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I agree. I think it's more Hogwarts than Break Bills in my experience. Although, in fairness, my experience with Break Bills comes only from the TV show, not from the books. But Break Bills comes off way more, I don't know, adult and dark and what have you.
I mean, Break Bills is the college
Right.
here, so it's got that going for it.
Right, and Strixhaven is a college, but tonally, thematically, it feels more like Hogwarts to me. And honestly, as we get into the adventure that's in the book as well, I feel like the story is more Harry Potter themed than it is magicians themed.
Okay.
Okay. I
Although,
mean,
if you want to read more about magical schools, you should pick up the Books of Magic from DC Comics.
Oh.
yeah, I was gonna
Also
say
a good time.
it's also important to note that those aren't the only
You're
two
right.
magical school options out there. There are a plethora of options that you could compare it
Right.
to, and most people will thank you to not be comparing it to the work "She Who Shall Not Be Named."
Well,
Yes, correct.
although, in fairness, she's not getting any royalties from this product. So.
Thank goodness.
Absolutely not.
And that's a major selling point.
It is.
If
Well-
you want to have fun magical school adventures without paying, she yeah,
As a matter of
You
fact, though, speaking of
she was I can't say.
this was the first 5th edition book that was produced by a female lead designer, Amanda Hammond.
Mhm.
So,
Yay, Amanda!
a much more important she. And Amanda did an absolutely fabulous job with this. There is so much to resonate with in the setting itself and the NPCs and the relationship system are great. And then we also have adventures in the book.
Right. Yeah. So the idea of Strixhaven, I guess, is that it's because it's a magic setting first, and so as tends to happen with magic settings, there are a handful of various organizations representing the different colors of magic, right? And so in this case, we have Quandrix, Witherbloom, Prismari. I'm going off the top of my head. What am I missing?
Silver
Lorehold.
Quill and Lorehold.
There you go. Silverquill and Lorehold.
And for anyone familiar with Magic, those are enemy color pairings.
So each of those, it's always been interesting to me that, like, the lore of Magic the Gathering is that magic comes from drawing on the power of various types of land and what have you, right? And yet none of the magic-based books that D&D has produced address or mention that in any way, shape, or form, probably because it doesn't comport well to the D&D version of Magic.
Right, they're definitely keeping what's useful and jettisoning every other thing in the world.
And they do kind of in a roundabout way, though, in that they definitely take care to kind of tie the color pairings more closely to, like, the type of magic. So, like, druid type stuff is definitely going to have the colleges that have, like, green and them more of that connection with nature. But it's not, like, an explicit connection there. We're not saying, druids and rangers, you get all the green mana spells, I'm trying to think now who would have all the black.
Witherbloom gets
Warlocks.
Yeah.
Warlocks. Yeah, there you go. I mean, but you can really get into some. It's not super easy to tie the classes to the magic colors,
Sure.
and that's intentional.
Well, and
We don't want to. You don't have to be the white cleric.
speaking of classes, this is a magic college. So,
Yes.
what happens if I want to play a Strixhaven campaign with my barbarian?
Yeah,
Well,
you can.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you end up taking one of the backgrounds, they're going to make sure that you get the background, you get the feat, and you're going to have some kind of spellcasting that you can access there.
Yep, you absolutely pick up some spellcasting just by playing the game. Also, in the adventures, a lot of what's happening in the adventures and in the subsystems for relationships and exams and everything, a lot of what's going on is just ability checks. So as long as you don't dump int, you've probably at least got a fighting chance.
Ooh. Though, if you've gone to university, you've got to assume you have a certain level of intelligence. So
You do not have to assume that. I assure you, you do not have to assume that at all.
Let me try this again. If you're going to university, one should assume that you would want your character to have a certain level of intelligence.
Yeah.
I did also go to university, and this is the U.S. Everyone, so you can go to university by just paying for it. You don't have to be smart.
Yes, correct.
You can also pass university that way.
See, I joined a fraternity, and so I met some winners. Real winners. They probably had a finance score when they went in, but there's this thing you can do that suppresses your intelligence a lot.
I was in a fraternity as well.
Attending sports ball games. No, that's not the thing.
That's not what I was thinking of. It comes in dime bags. I'm just leaving it there.
Those weren't on the magic item list.
No.
Yeah, weird.
There's an endless carafe of coffee on there, which is an important staple.
Made me so happy.
For university students who can partake of coffee. I cannot. So I was like, cool. We're reskinning this as an endless mug of tea.
All good.
It will not be an
So,
endless mug of
so it is worth noting at this point, I suppose, that not only am I working from a review copy, I playtested the adventures in this, and I think you say that, and I didn't catch it in my read through because I usually don't read very thoroughly, especially in the sections that I playtested, other than to just skim and see what changed. I think in the playtest documents, it was an endless mug of tea already. And they must have changed it to coffee.
I mean, coffee, I'm sure, struck more of a chord with the masses. Who were probably like, no, if you're pulling an all-nighter, you need coffee.
I suppose.
That and what do you think this is, Britain? No, coffee.
And in fact, there are mechanics for pulling an all-nighter.
Yes,
There are.
there are.
I'm so happy too.
So, I guess we got the gist, right? It's a magic school. The one thing that makes it, if you just take D&D and say, let's make a magic school and stick D&D on it, you would get basically Strixhaven as expected, especially with the different schools that we discussed. Except for the only thing that would stand out is the Owlin, that it has a new race for players to pick up, which are owl people running around and doing things as well.
Important to note, they have legs, they have arms, and they have wings. They are so cute.
So they're
And-
insects.
They're perpetually ruffled because they're teenagers. They haven't lost their baby feathers. So it actually mentions that specifically that they look scruffy because they're not full grown yet.
That's kind of wonderful.
It is. So we get a new race in the Owlin. We get new backgrounds and feats that connect you to the school. You get new spells.
One new spell per college.
One new spell for college. The backgrounds are worth going back to because they ended up being very powerful.
Okay.
Yeah,
Talk about that.
The most powerful backgrounds we've seen in official content.
It one-upped what Ravnica did.
Yeah.
So what makes these backgrounds so awesome?
All right.
Well, they
so
give you a feat in place of your feature.
yeah. When you take the background, you get the feature College of Choice Initiate, which gives you spells from your background. What is that?
Right?
Right. And also you get spells added to your class spell list, which, like, in past, we've seen you need to take a whole subclass and, like, commit your subclass to getting some of these spells put in your class spell list. I'm especially looking at Witherbloom, because think how the point of Divine Soul and Celestial Warlock is just to get Cure Wounds on the damn Wizard list, or Sorcerer list, or Warlock list, or whatever. But Witherbloom, background, done, no worries. Oh,
And it's
oh
not
my.
just added to your one class list.
Yeah,
If
true.
you multi-class, these spells are added to each of those class lists. So, you want it to take a warlock spell slot? Cool. But maybe you don't want to use one of your warlock spell slots. That's fine. You can use one of your wizard spell slots. Nobody multi-classes warlock and wizard, but you could.
Right?
Well, when you go
Sorcerer,
to a
Warlock, yeah.
when you go to a preeminent institution such as Strixhaven, you just might.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking college, I started at least 3 different majors before I finally
There
did
you
one. So it's entirely possible you could have a wizard warlock.
And I think
Well, I only did 2 before I made a big pivot to my 3rd.
Oh man, now I really wish your initiate feat from your background was your major, and then you minored in another college. That would actually have been awesome.
So the cool thing is, though, you choose a college, right? But that doesn't mean you can only do stuff in that college. You can
Yeah,
dip
true.
into as many of the colleges as you want. It's not like Hogwarts, where if you choose to be a Ravenclaw, you are Ravenclaw all the way. No, I mean, you can totally sit at whatever table you want, but like, you're not invited to any of the, the Hufflepuff only things. That's not really a thing here. It's just like if you do Lorehold, it's the Lorehold campus over there. All of the Lorehold specific classes are there. So it's more like, the math campus, the ag campus, the arts and humanities campus versus like, your boarding school type house.
Right. And it's worth noting that there's no expectation that like your party is made up of entirely people from one college. You could definitely sort of be all over the place and be from whatever college you want.
I think it's
Actually,
better if you don't.
Probably.
Yeah, and that's actually something I liked a lot better with this than, say, Ravnica, because in Ravnica it felt a lot harder to figure out why your guilds are working together, but here you're going to school together.
Is it?
Yeah,
Why
it's
are
easy
the
to just be
Azorius
released.
and the Simic working together?
Yeah, like the guilds mostly hate each other. This is just college kids being idiots, whatever. It's fine.
They could be in the same extracurricular or
Yep.
have the same job as well.
Magical baristas.
Yeah, like I think that one of the really fun parts of Session 0 is just how do you all know each other? Well, all right. So my best friend's sister.
No, it does say so there is a little sidebar specifically about the Strixhaven party. So obviously there's an introductory adventure in there. The assumption is that you are all first-year students participating in orientation activities to start. So yes, exactly. You start off by going, so what do you like to do for fun? Which store are you living in?
I just flashed back to my pre-fresh course. Oh god, so fast.
I totally cheated that whole bit in university. I went in as an honors student, and I had my major selected, so I lived in the female floor of the dorm that was set aside for like honors students, and each floor was like a specific major. So I was like on the honors engineering women's floor. There weren't very many of us, so we shared it with the interior design students.
So I'm gonna push back a little bit on some things that have come up. There's not adventures in here, and I wouldn't even say there's an introductory adventure in here. I'm gonna argue that this is an adventure book that has a more robust gazetteer than what we've seen from some of the other adventure books. Because I mean, it from page 40 on, it's an adventure.
But Jeff, if you look up on D&D Beyond, it is clearly listed under source books.
And yet, here we are, and I'm going to stick with my guns here.
So Jeff,
40 out of 224.
So Jeff, talking about the adventure actually starting on page 40 is mostly wrong, actually.
Okay.
Because it takes 20 more pages for them to just lay out the subsystems they're going to keep coming back to.
Okay, so even then, at page 60 through page 178 is all adventure content. That's the majority of the book.
almost exactly half the page.
Yeah, and that's not including the monster stat blocks, which would have been in an adventure product as well,
Or a setting book.
or a setting book, right? But I think it's more akin to they took the format of Descent into Avernus and moved the Gazetteer from the end to the beginning.
Yeah,
So 60 to 182. So yeah.
I think it gets fuzzier when you are talking about, like, whenever there's a Realms book and it comes out, it is often a source book as well as an adventure, but it is considered an adventure because that's the baseline setting. Whereas this is introducing the setting in D&D terms for the first time and also presenting this adventure. I really like that it has a big chunky adventure section there, because that's another thing that I don't mean to keep harping on Ravnica, but even with Ravnica, I know it was neat that there was the what are your guilds going to do for missions, but it's like, okay, I know missions. What does a campaign look like?
Right. No, I had similar concerns about the Ravnica book. But
I mean, the fact of the matter for me is that I need so little extra setting for what I imagine Strixhaven to be, because it's sort of I see it as a pocket plane that you just jump back to after you go have an adventure on some other plane. That may not be what they intend, but it sure is what I intend.
They intend that you could set it wherever you want. They actually, recommend that you set it somewhere where people from various realms can get to it. Place it wherever best fits your needs. World of your own creation. In Sigil, I like that idea, just because I like all the gates in Sigil. Yeah. Or in an interplanar nexus. There you go. So put your pocket dimension.
So in a lot of ways, like, it's a very small setting with malice aforethought, right? And I love that.
And yet, like, I'm gonna continue to be very firm that this is an adventure book. In the same way that I'm going to continue to argue until the day I die that Dungeon of the Mad Mage is not. That said, I think it's a good adventure. Like, I mentioned that I playtested it, and we got, like, through the first 1.5 sort of chapters of the adventure, of the campaign, and we had a really good time. It was a lot of fun, so...
I will say the blurb on the cover is kind of a point in Jeff's favor. Rollicking Campus Adventures.
Sure.
I would almost say this is a good introductory thing, if not for the fact that it does introduce a lot of extra tracking if you use all of the widgets in the adventure, which may not be an impediment to everyone, but it does go a little bit above and beyond what a regular D&D character would do.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a bit tricky to run because as a DM, it's got this relationship thing. It's got the jobs and the extracurriculars and all these things. And as a DM, like, I've been DMing a long time, but I still had to make sure to juggle those NPCs, figure out who are you interested in. The nice thing is, because they have, like, their little report card, and they're tracking those relationships. It was easy for me to very easily tell, oh, these are the NPCs they're interested in, right? My only strike against that little report card that Jenny is holding up for the stream folks is that I really expected it to be like an easily copyable page in the back of the book, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I was also not pleased about that.
It was a half page.
I'm like,
a half page where the other half is text is a little.
Honestly, if I had had that as a pull-out, punch-out thing in the back instead of the map, it would have been more meaningful. Because the map's, like, fine, but it's not super helpful.
The map is way too big to show on stream for someone my size. My arms, literally, I couldn't hold it up. I was trying to show it on mine, and I'm like,
And yet, the maps on the back are basically useless. They're in the book in the location where you need them. I don't know what purpose they serve on the back of the poster map.
To put on your wall?
If I'm going to put it on the wall,
why-
if I'm going to put it on the wall, why am I not going to put it on the side that looks pretty? It's all in color and has the whole campus.
You
Well-
want copies, right, Jeff?
What's that?
You want 2 copies, right? So you can do one and then the other, right? Next to,
Oh,
That's what I was gonna say. I've got two.
I did have 2 copies.
Who on
What?
earth would send away their spare copy? That's weird.
Actually, I now have 3 copies.
I salute your commitment to Sparkle Motion.
I'm gonna swing up to Michigan there and pick up an extra copy from Jenny. So
Oh, there are 4 copies at my
You're
house.
gonna get cut.
there are
son.
4 copies at your house.
Yeah, Alan has his
Oh,
copy.
okay.
What?
The biggest problem is that
Actually, there may be 5. I don't know if he has the standard cover too.
the
Probably.
biggest problem, of course, is that Michigan is really big. So the fact that I live 5 minutes away from Michigan does not mean I live anywhere near you. So,
Turns
but
out,
on the mitten.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm right here in the middle of it.
oh, I'm just below the mitten, just slightly onto the wrist. So,
I'll be
So
down your way in a couple of months.
yeah,
Not bringing you a book.
that's fine. Stop by. We'll grab dinner. It'll be fun.
I think I'll be your way anyways. I don't know geography.
So Jeff,
so I noticed
Yeah.
something in this one
Yeah.
though that struck me. In the other Magic books, it feels like they tend to avoid mentioning species or monsters that don't exist in the Magic world as well as in D&D. And there are a lot more references to D&D-isms in this one. Like, there are, when you're taking certain tests, you're studying physiology of things that are not from Magic.
that's true.
They are D&D creatures. There's NPCs that are Genasi, which is that's not a Magic thing. That's a D&D thing.
Wait,
Well-
are there no Genasi in the Adventures in Forgotten Realms set? Because
Well,
that peanut butter and chocolate is all mixed up
I
together.
suppose.
and that's what I'm kind of
There's
getting
a
at,
whole
though.
pile of Reese's cups. The peanut butter is in the chocolate.
But that's kind of what I'm getting at is it is getting a little bit more backfilled to where the lines are blurrier now than I think they were, for example, in Ravnica. Like, and I'll be honest, like the first thing when I was reading this thing, if I'm running this, I am totally going to have like Elminster or Mordenkainen or Tasha show up as guest lecturers here.
Right.
That's
Like-
outstanding.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
and
yeah.
here's the thing: is that they've done that now for a couple of adventures, right? This and Witchlight are both like you can stick this in literally any setting you want. So all things D&D count now. All things D&D are there and they're part of it and whatever, and that's fine because you can put it wherever you want. Strixhaven can basically just be anywhere. Witchlight starts from a carnival that travels the plains and whatever, so you can be anywhere there. They seem to be, I guess, drifting away a bit from the realms centric thing. Now, I don't know if that's a trend or
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a trend or a coincidence of 2 books that have done that coming out back to back, but
I mean, well, the next book that's coming out in March is also not Realms.
Yes.
It is Critical Role,
Right.
called The Netherdeep. So, the trend, it continues.
Sure.
I have no idea anything about that setting. It's, yeah. I'll
That is
review
also
that one.
weird though, because for a while, when you talked about the schedule, things like the Magic the Gathering settings and the Critical Role things were kind of considered in additional projects and not part of the main thing. So if you were just looking at an actual trend line, yeah, you could look at Wild Beyond the Witchlight, but like this and the Critical Role book don't necessarily represent a trend, quote unquote, because of
they're side things.
they're but I don't know if that's still a true thing, but it seemed to be a true thing for a while.
So
I'm gonna go with it's not a true thing.
I'm curious.
Well, what do I know?
I'm curious. I've come to the conclusion over time that, I mean, obviously, Theros is written in such a way that things in Theros to my thinking stay in Theros. If I'm not running a Theros campaign, don't ask me to bring that into my game, right? I've come to the
All right then. I'm sorry to everyone who plays the next couple of Forgotten Realms adventures I wrote because we brought Theros.
Oh, did you?
Nice.
Well, and ironically, Theros is the first thing whose mechanics actually transferred out of the book
Oh,
because, Mythic Actions,
I suppose.
almost, those jumped across pretty quick.
Yeah. Well,
And piety is worth grabbing.
Yeah, I love piety.
Yeah, mostly it's an issue with character options that show up in Theros and then also in Ravnica that seem to be not balanced for general D&D but are setting focused, and I feel like as we talked about the backgrounds in this one, there's that trend continued here where the backgrounds are clearly far and away better than any other background you could possibly ever take.
I mean, centaurs weren't overpowered, nor were satyrs. Bring them. Who cares?
Well, and you have to pick and choose a little bit, right? But like, I don't want Ravnica magic items in my game because certain combinations with Ravnica magic items can be game breaking. I don't, but none, the races I guess haven't been problematic. But
I was going to
The
say, I've
subclasses
seen,
are definitely in Tasha's.
Yeah.
and if you look across a few better known streaming shows, things like satyrs are definitely getting used by people outside of,
Yep. Yep.
And,
There's a satyr in my Dragon Heist campaign. Satyr
Mhm.
PD.
Oddly enough, in non-organized play games, the race that I've seen most frequently is the Verdun from Acquisitions Inc.
okay,
Oh, interesting.
I am
interesting.
kind of shocked by that.
They're just such interesting little fellows. People love them, and Acquisition Inc. was hugely popular. Now that said, obviously a disclaimer there. I was mostly doing organized play for the longest, so my population sample for each
Skewed.
the statistics are irrelevant because my sample size is small.
So,
So,
go ahead.
what I was going to say is one of the other things I find really interesting in the adventure is that it sort of it opens with those extra subsystems that we talked about. You've got your extracurriculars, your jobs, your relationships, your exams, right? And studying for exams. That's pretty cool. What surprises me is that they don't stop rolling out new subsystems or sort of para subsystems as that rolls along, right? With games and contests that they're creating these systems for. They aren't really all that ultra as system goes, right? Ability checks, it's fine. But
So
it's still interesting how much of the adventures seems to hang on, presumably non-lethal, preferably non-lethal combat situations.
that raises a question to me that's interesting. I've been in the gaming community, I guess, for a couple of years, right? So I've oftentimes heard the phrase that system matters and the system helps tell the story that you want to tell. And so I'm curious, as you have to add more and more and more subsystems to make D&D tell this story, is D&D even the right system for telling the Strixhaven story? Licensing and branding aside.
Yeah, I was going to say it's certainly the right system for WotC.
Right.
Obviously, I think there could probably be a better system, but I don't think it's the wrong system. And some of the subsystems aren't really even subsystems so much as it's more like a mini game within the game. Like specifically, Mage Tower is literally a mini game within the game, and you're still using the same mechanics and everything. They're just explaining to you what they feel is the optimal way to utilize these mechanics. And I think that's kind of the important thing to point out is it's all the same mechanics that we've been using. They're just all right, so when we're dealing with exams, this is how we recommend you do exams. It also says very clearly in sidebars, if you don't like these, please fucking ignore them. Carry on with your life.
Which is really weird the way they put fucking right there in that sidebar, but
I don't know if your writer has a
I 100% believe that Amanda would do
But
Entirely possible. Speaking of testing, as soon as I read testing and how that works, I would love to use that for people preparing for an adventure or a mission or something. Because you could actually repurpose that as, people pouring through a library in going through Candlekeep, trying to figure out, what you need to do, or where the ins and outs of this ancient fortress are and everything.
Yeah,
Well,
I actually had
so
that.
yeah, like building on that, it makes me think of all the different kinds of stats like that you would build up in Fallen London, right? So you've got casing for, hey, we're rogues casing a joint, and we're going to spend a bunch of time studying the place. Well, yeah, okay. Like, I think that's pretty beautiful and definitely worth stealing.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, the one thing I want to say to just, is this the right system? Like, there are many hypothetical systems that we could imagine slotting in, but all of them have their own, all the ones that actually exist, rather than, I'm sure there's some ideal system in the world. They all have their trade-offs.
Sure.
They're all wrong. Every system is wrong. Just be real about that. That's all I want.
I mean, is there ever
D&D is not more wrong than any of the other wrong systems.
right?
Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
because that implies that there's no that the system doesn't change the kind of story that's told, and I think it does. I think you tell different stories depending on what's encouraged by the system.
Right, but every system that exists is going to need some amount of patching to fit the story here.
Mm-hmm.
So
And-
Strixhaven
and this
is just so
expanding what
unique
D&D
that no system could.
No, but I'll
no
point out,
system is customized to this.
knowing the general arc of how these adventures go, I'll throw out there, if you used Kids on Brooms, which I've reviewed, you could do a lot of the non-combat things, but combat in Kids on Brooms is not a big thing. It resolves very quickly, and it's like, here's the consequence, and if this goes wrong, you're completely out of it. And these fights in here are not made to be quick, one and done, things. They're meant to be more engaging fights that are more D&D tactical and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So there you have a system that is built for magical schools that is still not perfect for doing this thing.
And another thing to potentially keep in mind is that people may have been playing this way with D&D since the beginning, but they're not the ones who got to write books for a long time.
Right. Yeah, and that's also very important. Like,
Because at Gen Con before 5th edition came out, I happened to be able to do a game with Merles and a few other folks, including someone who worked on Dungeon Bastard, and we were running a restaurant in this magical town and just had to deal with, like, things are going wrong, how do we fix it, these creatures come from another portal, and by the way, the health inspector's also there. What do you do?
so I mean, yeah, Acquisitions Inc. We're running a business. We're doing a thing. Like, they've been doing these big grand stories like this for so long, and that's the thing about D&D. Like, maybe it's not perfect for the school bit of it, but the school bit, that's the setting. I mean, I hate to say it, that's the mundane bit of their life here.
the magic school is the mundane part.
Right. The new rules that the book introduces are now part of D&D.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now D&D handles this fine.
Yeah. Well, and
Like, D&D is not only what's in the player's handbook, and never was.
Sure.
the other thing that I think is interesting, just because we mentioned this being less lethal, and also Wild Beyond the Witchlight was another game that was, or another adventure that was, less lethal. I still see this all the time in discussions. I don't think people realize in 5th edition, you can knock someone out with a melee attack. You don't have to say anything special. If you don't want to kill people, it's really easy not to kill people in 5th edition compared to other editions.
Non-lethal combat is huge. We use that so much in the organized play because, guess what you learn if you kill every single bad guy?
Yeah.
You learn how much they bleed.
That is a problem with this adventure. In the dueling portion, because there's a dueling portion, you are allowed to use melee weapons, and you are allowed to kill. How?
Right.
I'm not sure how the rules expect you to end that duel, other than, oh, I had sleep prepared, it's cool.
What'd be really cool is if there was a product out there that had dueling rules in it. Brandis?
That would be good. Someone should do that.
Yeah, that
Our
would
spell
be...
duels are not the greatest. I will grant that Vladari's spell duels lack a certain je ne sais quoi, like spells.
I had a quick question though on Jeff's point earlier about this being an adventure and not a setting guide. Does it change given that we're talking about a relatively small area from what I remember reading, given that this is a quick look at it? And so having it separated out doesn't necessarily make as much sense.
Right. No, I agree. Like, it would not make 2 books.
Yeah, and like having a whole bigger gazetteer wouldn't necessarily make sense because you really need that info. Like, it is a more focused adventure compared to going all over.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it is kind of interesting too, because Ravnica, when it first came out, there's been multiple sets, and there were art guides that filled in all these details, and it's a much more, spelled out setting, whereas this is a relatively new setting. We had a card set that introduced it, and
Ravnica is an entire planet.
yes.
Right.
This is a college
This is a campus, yeah.
But I will say, even if you're not going to set it in some of the alternate locations, the world that this is set on is still a pretty neat blank slate, because it's basically 2 different worlds that slam together. And then if you get into the backstory, there's some neat, like, recursive, things going back to the beginning of time and then feeding back forward. And all of that is really good for having that blank slate in the world. Like, you can find all these neat ruins and these things that have been lost, but the world itself is just 2 things that got crammed together. And the best D&D setting where 2 things have ever been crammed together.
So, to go back though to the no melee weapons and the dueling thing,
Yeah.
That's actually part of the location you do the dueling at. It has magical protections designed to break down magic without damaging creatures.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
I missed that because super brief read.
Right.
Yep.
Let me find that again.
It's because they're not directly next to one another. There's a little thing that says "See magical effects of this place." So that's under the Fury Gale repository, which is above the duels or before the duels. It
Can you
has
throw
all
me a
the...
pay number, please? I'm sorry. I saw it and then lost it again.
I'm looking at it on D&D Beyond, so no, I
Oh,
cannot.
my bad. My bad.
Can I throw you a page
It's a
number? Though?
backslash.
Nope.
Probably.
Bad call. Sorry.
Probably. Let's see. Fade appeared on the repository. I don't know. Somewhere around 130-ish.
Cool.
And I did read online somewhere some interesting feedback that I'd love to
Oh no,
talk about.
130.
Some interesting feedback on what, Tracy?
Okay.
On the entire thing, but I don't want to interrupt the very.
Go ahead.
The thrilling audio of finding a page.
It was page 130 at the very end.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenny.
One of the questions, because so there has been some criticism about some of the stuff feeling or being overpowered and things like that. And then the whole idea that you are going to college, you are spending 4 years in college, and you come out at 8th level,
right?
Or whatever.
People in this setting must be super powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is also kind of an elite planar college, though. So I mean,
I agree with them. It's just an interesting idea, like, because they were like, I can't bring this into my campaign because there's no way in heck they should come out this high level from college.
No,
and I think part of it is what you were saying, Jared, like in terms of folks not like this is an elite college, for whatever that means. Yeah. But
they already had a baseline understanding of how magic works. These were, Prodigies. Child prodigies.
My understanding is that people who go to Ivy League colleges are just better than the rest of us because they're higher level. Is that not
no.
right?
Oh no.
You, get out.
If anything I said could be construed that way, I apologize.
And for those who are not watching the recording and are instead just listening, the part of that little barb, I think, is because I'm wearing an Ivy League school skirt.
Well, Tracy is higher level than the rest of us. That much we know.
But I don't think it's because of the school she went to.
State university.
We'll never know.
I'll just see
We'll never
myself
know.
out, Tracy.
Some of the kids I went to school with, though, were like for instance, I was a government major, and they totally we were supposed to pretend that we were doing a policy, and some of them actually called up senators and did the policy. So I kind of get it. I was not one of those.
You didn't have your favorite senator on speed dial?
No, they did not
Uncle
come over to my parents' house for dinner.
Uncle Senator?
I mean, I don't know how much this actually feeds into that because we don't have a good baseline to juggle this, but one of the planeswalkers that shows up in a lot of decks, she went here when she was younger. So that's kind of what you're establishing, is it's that level, that kind of magical potential of a person that's, doing this kind of theorizing and learning and stuff like that.
It's the
Although they do
premier
not-
institution.
They do not, however, talk about the as many of the meta story connections as some of the other books, or some of the, especially Ravnica. Like, they
No.
do not mention Liliana at all in this, or that she was that she's a professor at one of the colleges or anything.
No, instead we get, lots of really cool stuff about like the founding dragons and some of the other cool NPCs, which the founding dragons are. Bananas.
Dragons are so boss.
Right?
I love
They're
them.
so cool. So back to the you graduate 8th level, and that's weird. It's not, though, because in actually both the Harry Potter books and in the Magician's books, the characters by the end of their time at that school are heavy hitters.
Right.
I
They're
mean,
not
yeah, you can
starting
take out the Dark Lords.
I mean, that's kind of
Right.
that's kind of the
Like, you go fight the beast.
that's kind of the genre, though, right? Is that
Yeah.
they are the heavy hitters, and that makes them unique in the world, and that's okay.
And
right.
and maybe some of
the
your
people
friends
who
did
go to this
graduate at
adventure
4th level.
Right.
Right.
All right though, but like, okay, so we've all been a party, of 8th level people, and you're like, you got one person who is technically 8th level, but you're like, are you helping us somehow? What are you doing? What spells did you take?
So
Oh, you took mending 6 times.
there's
Ouch.
one of the things, and I think
I'm saying that 'cause that's totally some of my characters. I am 8th level. Leave me alone.
one of the things that I think Brandis had sort of implied that I've been really thinking about and would be very interested in is what other adventures could splice into this adventure, right? It goes 1 to 8. So what other adventures can you... Because the storyline is you're adventuring for 6 months or 9 months or whatever it is out of the year, and then you all go home for summer break and nothing happens. Sort of like the Harry
Right.
Potter books, right?
Well, this is incredibly friendly to Candlekeep Mysteries. Oh my God!
Yeah.
It's so friendly to Candlekeep.
And I mean, they're already academic, so hanging out in the library would make sense.
I mean,
Right.
you could also splice in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. What do we do? What do we do on our
Oh,
summer
yeah.
break? We're gonna go to a carnival. What happened
Well,
to the carnival? We don't want to talk about.
So
I know
so
what
that's
you
a
did last summer. Happened to the carnival.
No, but so that's a thing. But you can't. But you'd have to do all the entirety of Witchlight within a summer, and I'm thinking
Why?
because if you leave, you can't leave Prismeer in the middle of the thing, can you?
So
just rewrite it, dude.
Oh, I mean, it's not. I've never done that before, but
I mean,
Yeah,
rewrite it.
dude.
Rewrite it, or do like what they recommended with the supplement that they put out, and just create your domain of delight.
right.
Yep.
No, but
Well, there's a lot of
I actually really like the idea of splicing it with Candlekeep Mysteries, because then you've got you run the two or three Candlekeep Mysteries that are level appropriate, sort of within the wherever they're at when they go on summer break, and then they come back and gain a couple more levels by telling the story of what happens on campus and dealing with the secret evil that is hiding out and doing horrible things on campus that you slowly discover over time.
okay.
Spoilers.
Next pitch. Tales from the Yawning Portal field trips. Yep,
I was gonna
Dead
say,
and Thay, that's what's up.
So obviously what we lead into, though, when they're done with university, is we lead into the adventure that is apparently not an adventure, where we all go to the Yawning Portal and go down to the Dungeon of the Bandmaid. Guys, school has fully prepared us to take on anything we find, right? Right? Out the war?
The amount of just the last panel is this is fine. getting cut into that comic strip is very clear in my head and very funny.
I just got this terrible image too of all these people that went to school to be like magical, learning the deep theories of magic and everything, and then like they go into dungeon delving and their parents are just like, why did we pay for this?
That's right.
There's dungeon
right.
delved right out of high school.
Understanding the deep theory of transmutation allows me to really stand there, stare at a dungeon wall, and be like, that's not what it seems. I promise you it's not. I can't really explain it, but I know it's not. Don't touch it. And then, of course, someone's like, I don't know. You paid a lot for that degree, but are you sure? Touches it.
Right.
Is eaten. Yeah, good.
Becomes one with the wall.
So I want to call out a couple of the other like mashups and variations on this that I want to see. So, like, there are totally rules for writing your own domain of dread, right?
Yes.
And now there's rules for running a college. So I want Dracula's Scholomance as its own domain of dread. Like,
all right. Well,
where all of the relationships in this. Well, right, yeah. Like, I don't want them to publish it. I want to get to write it. I'm excited about writing that at some point. That's what I'm saying. But, like, taking this and turning all of it into gallows humor is very appealing to me. And then also ramming this into Fizzbans at top speed is going to be awesome.
So I really like some of the stuff they set up here for how you can kind of write your own adventures too for this magical school setting for like, the lower year students and stuff with what they have with the Oracle and the Archaics. So the Archaics have their vast knowledge of everything. So you go and you ask them something and they send you on this quest. I mean, or so you think anyway. It's really hard to understand what they really said to do. And so like you've got all these people going off on these wild goose hunts. Because I'm pretty sure that's what the Archaic said we were supposed to do.
And the other thing that I was thinking, and this comes from the fact that it specifically says, people come to the school from all over the place. And if you have players, let's say one of your players made up a character from Eberron, and one of your players made up someone from Forgotten Realms, and like those in-between adventures can be like, hey, let's go hang out at your house. So, and that's literally a different plane, for each person in between years when they go to see, where someone else is from.
We're going back to Eberron. What are we going to do? Dad needs us to do some
Well, and honestly, one of the things as we're talking about how does this combine with other settings is I kind of like the idea of it mashing up with Eberron, where not only is the party made up of people who may be from different schools at Strixhaven, but they're all from different families, from different dragon-marked families of Eberron, and then all hate each other in the world, but like you're in college and you come together and you become friends, and is this going to be a thing that the life back in Eberron, is this going to tear you apart, or are you going to prove that the power of your friendship forged at college is going to bring the dragon marked houses together? That sounds like a fun campaign to me.
It's all
Suggest-
doomed though, because there's
Yeah.
LARPers.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so excited
I'm in
with the
favor
LARPers.
of LARPers, but I'm just
Yep.
saying it's.
I don't know
LARPers.
I don't know when the question appeared in the Twitch chat, but I want to know if we're suggesting that the founder dragons of Strixhaven are great worms, and we are not.
Brandis, are you making that suggestion? Because you talked about it. Yeah, that's what I thought.
I mean, I don't know
Sounds
that I would
amazing.
disagree. I don't know that I would disagree with that, though.
Or even the flip side of that, what if like your founders are being hunted by people hired by reflections
Right.
of them in other worlds trying to absorb them?
Right? That's
Are they going to absorb the math equation?
that all
flying
does
at their face?
that sounds like a pretty epic campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Ass in the face.
And again, that's another natural transition here. You get out of school when you're 10th level. What happens? You get hired on as staff.
And it actually mentions that too. Like many students, after they graduate being used real loosely. They're like, man, I really like it here. I'm just gonna keep learning forever. And then eventually they're like, hey, you've been here a while and you know a bunch. Do you want to teach? So you end up being like Strixhaven becomes kind of like your life. You never leave university. You just become a professor and you get tenure.
that takes 10 years, right?
That's
Yeah.
circling back right there. I appreciate that.
Although it's a callback from before we started recording, so most people won't get it. But yeah,
That's okay. Context.
it's like I oftentimes tell my students, the jokes aren't for you. I'm just entertaining myself up here. So
That is what all jokes are for. If you happen to think it's funny, great, wonderful. Join in with the humor. But yeah, I mean, there's so many options for how you can tie this in both in between years of school and where do you go after it. You can then go to Ravnica and choose to join a guild and hate your non-fellow guildmates if you want, or you could be like, I had this guy, he was from House Azorius, and I understand we really are supposed to hate them, Mom, but explain to me why.
Or you could be from outside of Ravnica and take over a guild and be an absentee guild master like certain people.
Well, just the storyline where you going to Ravnica as a 10th level character and fighting Nicol Bolas is a good time. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, a bad time.
By bad time, I mean I do mean good time, as adventuring.
but fun
is
for the
also-
players, yes.
Doesn't Nicol Bolas seem like the type of dragon that would kill off mirrors of himself in order to get more powerful?
Or already has.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, of some of the things that are in here, I know relationships, school relationship boom, but I have played enough BioWare games. I want some adventure that has this option in it that is not necessarily just a college thing. I have played Dragon Age, and I want options.
Here's the trick, though. When you play Dragon Age, you're playing one character and everybody else is an NPC. When you're playing D&D, you're in a party of other PCs. The relationship thing is less about the mechanics and the subsystem and more about the role-playing you do with the other players.
Yeah, but what if you have the campaign has
Sure.
a clearly established
And that's
home
where it
base
makes
and there are
sense,
people
right?
at that home base.
Or in, Out of the Abyss, when you have 5 million NPCs, although it's one of my least favorite things about that adventure.
So,
I mean, Trollskull Manor is a great place to meet
Mhm.
all of your regulars.
yeah.
Your norm, let's say, could be a norm.
And while we're on the NPCs and the relationship stuff, so the NPCs have no predetermined orientation. As an article I was reading earlier today said, they have Schrodinger's orientation. They are both
Steve
queer, queer and hetero. until
Yeah.
you hit on them, and then
Steve
they're
Jensen's
Yeah.
article on that was really great.
and then they're into you if you're into them. And that could be multiples of you into one of them, or multiples of them into one of you. Like, the sky is the limit.
Right.
You can have as many beloveds as you want, which can easily turn into all of your beloveds
Right.
hating you.
Well, and
as anyone who's
I assume this made it into the final product as well. But in the playtest, they even make the point that that relationships and even beloveds isn't necessarily about a romantic relationship, right?
No, it says
Yeah.
that there.
it does.
The one thing I wish about relationships, and maybe this is in the adventures and I just haven't read them, is that I wish having a really high rival score was
Yeah.
also beneficial rather than
Right.
Yeah.
quasi-punitive, like lightly punitive, narrative punitive, just because
Right.
engage with that. I don't want to feel like that was a
Establishing
bad
rivals-
go to-
Yeah.
Establishing
Like,
rivals is almost
build heat in that
entirely
rivalry.
a narrative thing, and that doesn't have the same mechanical encouragement that having relationships does. When we play tested, I had one player who's like, "Well, there's a rival thing. We should play with that too." So he like really pushed, like he found his Draco Malfoy and was gonna push that button every single time he could, and it was fun. But yeah, it wasn't encouraged by the mechanics. So.
Right. And, like, I don't know if you've ever been a fan of any sort of intellectual property, but rivals to beloveds is
Uh-huh.
a thing, and
That's
it doesn't tend to work its way through the point spectrum. It
Switch on
tends
a
to just
dime, yeah.
suddenly become its absolute value.
That's what I was going to say. At some
Congratulations.
point, you should get locked into the place where you both work after
Right.
school, and you can't get out because they have magical locks, and all of a sudden that 2-point rivalry just flips around to being beloved.
Right, yeah. I mean, this is
Yeah.
terrible, but also amazing.
I mean, there's no reason why.
Oh, other than the
can't do that.
mechanics don't
Right.
don't encourage that, right? That's not the system as it's designed.
Yep. They do
Well,
not. I mean, but
it's
they were
not.
trying to keep it
Mhm.
straightforward and simple. Like, putting that in the mechanics, that tracking sheet, which is not a handout at the back of the book that we already discussed,
Right.
would be even more complicated. Keeping it simple like this, it allows you to use it very straightforward. But you can always, I mean,
Right.
you can always tweak it.
Accurate.
Well, so you just turn the numbers into a circle, where if you get to the highest negative, when you click over, then it flips
Right.
over into the
No, and Where-
that could be
and-
the AO3 side.
so we're talking about the way
There we
we're
go.
talking about a little bit
Yeah.
about the way the subsystems sort of encourage certain sorts of behavior with the relationships and what have you. It is also worth noting. So the testing mechanic gives you some bonuses depending on the skills you use. You get some, and if you pass the test or whatever, you get a certain number of dice, or is it re-rolls or whatever it is.
No, it's
To a roll,
dice
yeah.
You can add
And
to
extracurriculars have a similar sort of mechanic to it. It was a lot to track in the playtest, and my players almost never remembered that they had those. But we also, because it was a playtest, we didn't actually have the finished version of the report card here. So maybe having that actually in front of us might have helped. I don't know.
report card for them.
It's on page
I
43.
lost my report card. It's somewhere.
Dog ate it.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, I am so sorry. I need to
Yep.
drop off a call.
Have a good one, Brandis. Before you go, do you want to tell people where they can find you?
So thank you so much.
Hi, Brandis.
You can find me on tribality.com. You can find me on Twitter at Brandis Stoddard. My personal blog is Brandis Stoddard, and my Patreon is Brandis Stoddard. Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed getting to talk to all of y'all.
Cool.
Stay awesome. Stay in school.
Peace out.
Stay in school forever.
I
Are you
mean,
kidding?
we all
I've
wish-
literally never laughed.
I'm almost done again.
You don't have to pay the student debts till you leave, right? That's how it works. Anyway.
Anyway.
Hi, Brandis.
Gosh.
So I think this is probably a good time. We have had a rollicking, fun conversation about Strixhaven, and I think if people listen carefully, we've also talked about what's in the book in the middle of that. I think there's good information there. But to make sure that we have provided the high quality, valuable information that Tome Show listeners are begging for. If there's anybody in the stream who has questions that you would like about the Strixhaven book that you would like us to discuss, you got some time to post that in the chat now. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping things up here pretty quick. Did anybody have any last thoughts before we talk to the stream about their questions?
I wouldn't mind seeing those more like beefy backgrounds tied to other adventures. Not these specifically, but I mean like having a background where it gives you this feat and it gives you all this other stuff that ties you directly into the adventure presented in an adventure book. Like, where this is directly saying you are part of this,
Okay. I think it's important to kind of acknowledge though how these backgrounds ended up so beefy was the ambitious plan to have subclasses that weren't tied to classes.
I still want to see that.
Yeah, that is what they did, right? They play tested having these subclasses that weren't class specific. I do remember that.
It was convoluted.
Right.
But I kind of liked the idea though, because it was something kind of neat and
well, and I kind of think you could maybe fix it a little bit if it wasn't tied to the background. Make it a feat, fine, but don't let.
I mean, it also is a feat. You
could
also just take.
You could just take the feat, but it makes a background way more powerful than I am willing to bring into any game that isn't set in Strixhaven.
Yep. And it also means that they are definitely about to. So Organized Play so far, it's been like, yeah, whatever background you want. And they're about to be like, you know what?
Except
not that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except not the Strixhaven books.
Yeah. which is the thing, right? Strixhaven. That's the thing that makes it so I want to keep most of the mechanics from this book in this setting. Ravnica, for me, it's a lot of the magic items, maybe some of the spells or whatever. Are there spells in Ravnica? I don't even remember now.
Yes.
That I kind of want to keep.
I
want to keep in.
The backgrounds also give you spells.
Yeah,
in Ravnica,
so I want to keep.
Too. They don't have.
There's a lot of Ravnica I want to keep in Ravnica, and then obviously Theros has this whole hey, you're working for the gods, and that's super powerful. That has to stay in Theros to make sense.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that because it's just piety, really, and like the gods remain ever fickle, so like it's not necessarily overpowered because like okay, you're working for the god, okay, cool, you're peon number 782, and he can
to that god, but you're still 5,000 times more powerful than your peers. So.
What are you?
I actually have what I think is a fairly brilliant hack of the Theros book to run my kids through a Rick Riordan, like Percy Jackson, Magnus Chase sort of campaign that I think would work really well. So
we've got a mini campaign that Alan. I don't want to take too much credit for it. Alan wrote. I contributed some ideas and wrote some other stuff in the supplement. But it is very much like that kind of Percy Jackson thing, going on a big mythical beast hunt, like tales of myth and lore, and like I think like it goes well. Like you could tie that stuff into whatever. Like Theros is the exception for me. I don't think that you have to keep it in Theros. I think you can take it and shove it in the Forgotten Realms just fine.
I mean, I think if you're, but I think if you're doing that, you're running a Theros campaign in another setting. Like the other players have to be Theros style characters too, because I don't think it mechanically balances.
So here's something that I was thinking about. This was a newer setting. Ravnica's been around for a long time. Do you think when and if they do another Magic setting, it's going to be a new one, or it's going to be one that has already appeared before?
I don't know, but I know I want Zendikar and I know I want Dominaria.
Well, here's what I know. I'm not a Magic player, so whichever ones of those are really popular, then I imagine that'll be what's next.
Both of the ones I listed. I want Dominaria for my Artificer. We are about to go to town and become so evil.
One of the things that we haven't talked about with the adventures, and I think this is true all the way through. I'm flipping through as we speak to double check this. Yeah, that they give just a really brief blurb at the beginning of every adventure describing how you could run this adventure as a standalone, or they all come together into a 4-year campaign because everybody finishes colleges in 4 years, right? And so you could do it either way. So you could either say there are 4 standalone adventures in this book, or you could say there is a small 1 to 8 campaign in this book. Honestly, I think it runs probably better as a campaign, but I thought it was an interesting sort of design choice to purposely sort of set the adventures up in that way.
I mean, that's kind of how Harry Potter was. He had a standalone adventure every year, but it, formed into one overarching campaign to take down the Dark Lord.
But that's not what they're doing here. So if Harry Potter was running it as a campaign, when they say standalone adventure, they mean like it changes the conclusions of some of these stories so that it doesn't tie to the other thing. If you want it to tie, it'll feel like 4 independent weird things that happened this year that in year 4 suddenly you realize, oh, it was all connected, or we slowly built up to this thing or whatever, right? But yeah, I thought that was an interesting choice as well. Something that I don't know that we've seen before, that you could consider that to be a collection of 4 standalones or a campaign.
And I do really like how they did those tidbits about making it standalone, because they don't make each one feel, like you said, disjointed. Like, if you're just doing the one, the changes that they make in that small paragraph for each one are significant enough to where you feel like you really accomplished something. You started the thing, you finished the thing, it's done.
But if you play it as a campaign, do you have to take the 4th one and split it into 2? Sorry.
What do you mean? For your super senior year?
Because that's what they did with Harry Potter. The 7th year, they split into 2 movies. So.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry.
It was only 1 book, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well,
my mom is reading
honestly, again, I keep talking about playtesting it, but that's the play experience I have, right? You learn so much more about an adventure by playing it, and obviously some things have changed, but this is, I oftentimes think about like, okay, what was our big feedback on this adventure? Okay, now I want to look and see what changed, right? When it was Witchlight, I can point to specific things that changed that we had made comments about. I don't know if it was our feedback that led to the change, but there are changes in Witchlight with a playtest that was based on comments that we made. This one, we made some comments that like we got through pretty much all of year 1 in 2 sessions, and then we got through like only the very beginning of of year 2. Because that very beginning thing just took a really long time. Like that was a whole session, and that's all we got. And we did. I don't know that we even finished it. So it was. It could have been split up into 2 books. I guess is what we're saying, or 2 movies, right? I guess is what I'm saying. Is that some of the things are like short, little, interesting vignettes, and you sort of jump through an entire school year with these little vignettes, and then all of a sudden, every now and then, you're into a thing, and it's like, okay, now you're basically going to do like a whole dungeon crawl and slow down for a bit and spend a few sessions doing that.
So, thinking on that though, so I think that's interesting because Baldwin Games this coming weekend is running Strixhaven as part of the virtual weekend, which obviously makes it into a kind of structured thing because they have to have each DM run it fairly similarly, and they split year 1 into 3 parts. Part one does include time for character generation. So 12 hours worth of content is what they're saying.
That's about what we ran it. So we run, what do we start? We run maybe 4 or 5 hours at a time. And so I guess we ran about 10 hours worth of content on it, and we did character generation ahead of time. So
yeah, so
that
another
runs about
hour.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, so, there, and if you're worried about time and keeping it consistent, obviously your group, you can sort that out. Or you think your group.
And year one runs more of, and then I guess that's what my point is, right? As you're playing through this adventure, some sessions it's going to be, well, we went through like 5 or 6 different scenes, and these different little things happened, these different events occurred. We played this mini game of what is it, launching frogs or whatever at the tavern and whatever, right? And we did 5 different things in one session, and then another session is like, and then you just did one thing the next session. And so sometimes you're going to run through 6 months worth of time in one session, and sometimes you're going to run through like an hour's worth of time in one session, and get used to that sort of zoom in, zoom out sort of approach.
Yep, and there are tables for encounters that you can put in each of the adventures for the different years. So if your party is full of lollygaggers, maybe don't choose the combat session encounter. That's going to take ages. Or don't choose the combat one where they're going to role play it for ages. Like there's one with some people claiming to be something they're not, and I definitely have some groups where I'm like, yeah, this would not be a combat encounter, but this would still take a good hour.
Yeah. Well, we've given the chat in the stream some time to ask questions. We haven't gotten any questions other than the ones that sort of came in as we were chatting that we kind of tried to feed in and talk about anyway. So unless anybody has any final last thoughts of something you really wanted to say about this book before we head out, it is approaching my bedtime, so we should be wrapping things up.
I don't want to take a lot of
talk about the art.
But art.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of really great portraits and characters. There's more. There's other art, but the thing I most want to talk about is being able to have a lot of character art that you can use both here and for your own games.
Mm-hmm.
The character portraits that they did, and I'm showing those on the stream, obviously you'll have to look at the book yourself, that they did for each of the NPCs, though, are just like absolutely breathtaking. They give you some idea of like what each character is like, their attitude and everything. Like the dwarf strong woman does without even.
Although here's some insight. They changed her last name, and her original last name in the playtest was a lot more fun, but maybe not super. I guess it was a distraction. So.
I want to know.
Well, maybe after the stream is over, I'll tell you. I'm not always entirely sure what the NDA allows me to and not to talk about. So.
I do like, though, that they still definitely went with some interesting names, like the gnome here, Rosie Mip and Bip was Bedlams. Just call her Rosie, it's fine.
Yep.
Like, yes. That's a gnomish name right there. Yes. I know what she's about, and I know that she says it just as fast as I said, hi, I'm Rosie Miffin.
Yep.
Nice to meet you.
Yep, absolutely. No, my characters playing it absolutely had a blast. Like it was very clear which NPCs they wanted to interact with, and then they had a really good time interacting with those NPCs. It worked out really well. They each took their own little... every character that they made very clear, specific choices because of the setting and how I described it as basically D&D college at a magic college or whatever. And so we had the very privileged sort of elf who's very serious but doesn't really know what he's doing and kind of bumbles a lot but has to act like he's very accomplished and whatever. And then we had the one character made a pixie, I think a pixie barbarian, because we wanted to see what it was going to work like not having a spellcasting character. So he played a pixie barbarian who just absolutely fell in love with Greta and became a bouncer at the bar and oh my god, it was and would he and the guy who plays him, he's kind of big guy and whatever, and with big red hair and a big beard, whatever. And then he put on his "Oh yeah, this is super fun" sort of voice, and then his wife, who's at the game, played a kinku, and so one of the so she'd pick up little phrases like the pixie would be like, "Oh, this is so exciting," and so the kinku would pick that up and okay, that's my phrase, but it would have to repeat it in a high pitched voice, and so we had a good time, and part of that was definitely the NPCs that they really enjoyed building connections with.
Yeah.
That's my biggest takeaway from this is I was really excited to look through this because it is a fun book. Like it is an exciting book to look through because it's just fun.
Yeah, and
unlike
and I haven't. Hey! You need a better professor.
No, I enjoyed university. You've been good?
Yeah, and I can't speak to, I mean, we had a really good time playing through the chapter and a half that we played through, right? I can't speak to, other than a really brief read through, how the second half of the story plays out in terms of how fun it is, but it looks like they kind of keep up the same sort of pace, but at the same time doing completely different things. You're not really repeating tasks, so it seems like it'd be a fun adventure to run, and I don't know when, because I already have like the next 5 years of campaigns planned out in my group right now, but at some point I'd like to revisit Strixhaven, I think so.
Yeah, I want to both play this and run this, and I'm gonna
Right?
eventually do that. So still looking for someone who's gonna run a game that I can play in.
You want to make the drive down to South Bend every Friday? We got a game. Oh, okay.
No, I'm probably looking for an online game.
All right.
I know. We're gonna do games here eventually. We got to get our game room reassembled.
All right. Any other last thoughts? We've been talking about last thoughts for like 15, 20 minutes now. All right. Let's go ahead and call that the end of the episode.
We'd like to say thank you to all our listeners who support us by becoming patrons at patreon.com/thetomeshow, such as Gene Crane, James D'Alessio, Hyperlexic, Jill Sanders, Leonard Peltier, Doug Palmer, and Michael Harrison. We'd also like to thank our guests. Ginny, where can folks find you?
You can find me online at Jenny Loveday. It's GINNYLOVEDAY on everything. Now that I've finally gotten my YouTube sorted out, and I'm so excited. You can also find me on my website, jennyloveday.com, in case you forget where to find all of the other links, and over at my Twitch channel and stuff. And the Designer's Den there, where I'm totally going to talk to you one day, Jeff.
You know where to find me.
I do.
And Jared for coming on. Where can find you?
Well, you can find me at Gnome Stew, where I usually do a couple reviews a month. And on top of that, I have my own blog where I do even more reviews, and that is at whatdoiknowjr.com. And if you want to hit me up on Twitter, you can look for me at whatdoiknowjr.
All right, and we already heard from Brandis. We don't need to plug him anymore.
You can find Brandis on the internet.
Right. Pretty much at a lot of basis, right? So if you want to get a hold of the show, you can email thetomeshow@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter. I am at Squatch, SQUACH. Tracy is at Sarah Darkmagic, Sarah with an H. The show is at The Tome Show. We also have a Facebook page. We have a Discord that is just the right size. And you can find links to that actually in our Twitter bio, or shoot an email to thetomeshow@gmail.com. I'd be happy to share you a link. Yeah.
And that's our surprise round episode about where we went to school, we became mighty magical adventurers, while we were looking at Strixhaven, a curriculum of chaos, in this episode of
The Tome. The end. All right. I got to find OBS so we can say goodbye to the stream. There we are. Too many windows.
That's how I end all my streams. Where's that dang button?
Right? Tracy painted cacti for the stream tonight.
Yep, it's in a coloring
Nice.
watercolor coloring book.
Very good. All right. Bye, stream.